Welcome back to another episode of Pain Points. And we just wrapped this episode and we're coming to you with a new thing where we're going to give you a lead in to today's pod, what we talked about, what we dug into. And the big takeaway on today's pod that I got mostly from Samson's words were delayed gratification is the hallmark of a successful and a broadly successful entrepreneur, not just monetary, but across the board, the ability to delay the gratification and stay focused on the task, the outcome, the goals, and ambitions. That was my takeaway. What about you on today's episode?
Good. And I would say that iconic opportunity to reinvent brand messaging by better storytelling, authenticity, and a little bit of nostalgia, like back to traditional values.
So on that note, we have delayed gratification, the brand nostalgia, really connecting with the consumer. And so if those are things that are really at the top of mind or somewhere stirring in you as you're building your business, you're really going to love today's episode. So enjoy it. Thanks for listening. How you doing?
I'm doing really good, man. You know, I spend a lot of the fourth quarter just really reflecting on my life, my goals, how we done in business, how I'm doing as a dad, how am I doing as a Christ follower. But I was watching the CU football game this weekend, and for obvious reasons, you know, they're in the top 25 now. They're ranked 16 coming into the weekend, and they're playing Kansas with the opportunity, if they solidify beating Kansas, that they're going to the Big 12 championship. And they got completely owned on execution. And what I realized reflecting on that was they haven't won a game without some really big defensive breakout plays. So, you know, Travis Hunter at the goal line against like BYU for a big fumble recovery, a pick six or something like that to get points on the board. So their defense scored like 0 points effectively. And because of that, they were just getting wally-womped on momentum. But more importantly, you know, obviously I'm a CU guy, but Kansas has beaten in the last 3 games top 25 teams after going 1-6. So they were 4-6 coming into the CU football game.
Yep.
And they are now 5-6, and they're going to end the year probably at 500. And so it's just a good reminder that it's not necessarily about how you start, it's about how you finish, and the game is infinite. And I was just really amazed at the gelling that team had. More specifically, I was watching their offensive line, and man, these guys were just unbelievably athletic, and they just executed. They were running these zones and powers, and it was unbelievable. But more importantly, if you watched Neal, their running back, he was helping his teammates out by, you know, setting up the block for the offensive line so that they could just execute as a unit, and they just were meshing. It was so cool to watch.
Yeah.
So it's just that's why I love college football. Any given Saturday, somebody can come out there and dominate. But more specifically, the lesson in that is just, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. Execution's worshipped. You know, you're never behind. You know, nor are you ahead. The game is just the game, and the only objective to the game is to keep it going as long as possible.
Dude, so I appreciate that, because on the other side of that too, if you listen, I listened to Deion's post-game press conference, and in the same vein of entrepreneurship, one of the things he was talking about was how essentially humility. So the execution piece of making a great team, a great organization, but that humility piece of like, we can't be out here feeling ourselves. He was very adamant that he felt his team and the coaches, because he's going to blame himself. He's a leader. He says, we were feeling ourselves. We were smelling ourselves, is what he said.
Yeah. They went from being completely unranked to number 16, right? Like, that's pretty impressive out of 145 teams or whatever it is.
Yeah. And so that other era of that is that humility piece of like, okay, we didn't execute today. The better team, the better company won. We got to get back to the drawing board. And he called the mistakes for what it is. He pointed out his defense, you know, just they couldn't tackle the soul. And so just to jump onto that, I thought that was a really neat observation too, because you could have easily just been like, you could have easily kind of been backhanding the competition while talking about how you didn't play well, but he was the whole time was just like, they played way better than us. They wanted it more. And I love the coach. The coach has a great program. And it's funny because real quick, a lot of the analysts were saying this team is a really good team. They shouldn't be 4-6. They just made a lot of turnovers and they shot themselves in the foot throughout the year. But they were a really good team.
Yeah, really, really fun to watch.
Yeah.
It's also a good reminder for us too, like we in business, you don't necessarily live in a finite game world, right? It's like the hard thing about a football season is, you only have 12 to 14 games to make something of yourself. And for some of those guys on that team, they're never going to get another chance, right? So business, you always have this opportunity to just keep playing the game. The only rule of the game is to stay in the game long enough, right? To quote unquote, get ahead or break out or, get your hooks into the market and be successful. So anyways, just wanted to start there. I thought it was like very meaningful trying to find, business lessons in everyday life. That's something I really love to do. So
I dig it, man. Thanks for sharing that. Well, let's jump into some entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So this first one is a post that came from a guy named Andrew D'Souza, who actually grew up in the YCombinator ecosystem. But he made this interesting post that I tend to agree with, which is the startup industrial complex created by Paul G and YCombinator is rotting the creativity and ambition of a generation of founders with a paint-by-numbers approach to entrepreneurship. Founders, go off script, have an original idea, stop building for a niche, build for humanity. And then he made one more additional comment. He said, don't get me wrong, I'm a proud YC alum. The network has been immensely valuable to me personally and the startup ecosystem as a whole. But when I talk around San Francisco and hear people mindlessly reciting PG,
Paul Graham,
essays or startup school lessons without applying any critical thinking or judgment, it makes me sad about the future. And I think the same thing could be said about, we all tend to like mimic what other people do, or we look at other people's success and we try to recreate it because we think that that's, it's what they wore, it's what they said, it's how they spoke, it's where they did business, and that's really couldn't be further from the truth. And so the allure to becoming an entrepreneur or being a content creator, like everybody's just mimicking everybody. Nobody's creating original ideas or original content or format. And we've even fallen victim to some of that too, right? And I think we're just, as we've grown and we found our niche, we're starting to break out and realize that our niche actually appeals broadly to everybody. We can create interesting content and kind of interpret the world, and that's what people are ultimately looking for, is like a sage advisor. But creating content is going this direction of like authenticity, and that's what people want to do business with authentic companies, right? And so I think that there's just a real shift happening in the space in business in general right now that we should all be paying attention to. And because the tech sector is getting bled over the last 4 years, people, the allure with being a tech founder is starting to fade a little bit. And the way that people look at that space is changing. So,
yeah. And I think it coincides too with when you look at things from a macro sense, you look at things from a societal level in our nation, in the West, you take it to a geopolitical level, you take it to an economic level here throughout the world. When things begin to, I don't want to say go bad, but when things start going less than ideal, you start getting your sober glasses on and you start realizing what's tried and true. And, you add this overarching lens of the West that is continuously railed against its foundations. And now it's realizing like, oh, maybe that's not the case. And so that just trickles down into, the business world where you're like, oh, not everyone's going to be Zuckerberg. Not everyone's going to be able to get these weird valuations that they haven't actually tangibly proven anything and then just disappear with a pocket wads of cash in their pocket. And hopefully they'll get another shot,
Well, I can speak to that directly with your sentiment that you just said, because 2019, up until 2019, the world of venture capital and private equity was all about growth in the world of tech and maybe even tech-enabled services. And then everybody gets wally-womped. Everybody's, losing a monthly recurring revenue like crazy. And the sentiment changes to cash flow and EBITDA.
Yeah.
And then here we are coming out of it 4 years later under new administration. And we're starting to have these conversations with our investors, raising capital to continue to build out the clearly acquired platform, raising money for funds. And it's this, the sentiment is, oh man, that seems risky, right? It's like, hey, I get it. I understand that. So how do we adjust our talk track or our strategy to accommodate our investors and deliver what they actually want, which is, near-term cash flow with the ability to participate in a larger opportunity? Because people aren't just excited about the growth story anymore, the opportunity story anymore. So I think that's just important for our listeners to think about is, you have to constantly be changing and adapting to the market. You can't raise capital the way you did 4 years ago. It's different. You can't use the same strategy for sales or marketing that you did 4 years ago because it's different today.
Yeah. Well, and he said it too in that tweet. He used the word humanity at the end, building for humanity. And it's that piece of like in the trend chasing, the copycatting, the doing what works, the thing we've seen happen for many years, not even just the last 12, 15, right? Where you're like, here's what works, go do it. Here's what works, go do it. Let me cut down the success rate. You lose sight. You end up becoming robots.
Yep.
And now we're having to face the reality of like, well, we're actually dealing with some real robots. And now it's like, okay, what am I again? It's like, I'm a human being. I got to get back to this.
That's true. I mean, you saw that same thing happen with content, right? Where people are just doing what everybody else is doing, parroting that. And then now everybody has access to AI. Now everybody's just parroting the same stuff, right? So you've been saying this forever, but content is definitely going to be the breakout.
Yeah.
Like it's very hard to fake a video or a podcast, right? You can't just say, hey, AI, make a podcast for me. Hey, AI, create this, nice video for me. So the people that are good communicators or have been practicing that and really working on that skill are the ones I think that dominate in this new level playing field, circa 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see too how far that goes, because how far the AI piece goes, because they're trying to build it to such a way where you can't do what we're doing, but you're going to be able to do other things. And it's just going to be very interesting to see like AI influencers, they're going to be really dialed in to the point where it's just an AI influencer. It's not even a real person. The company just owns the IP for it. And so it's going to be very interesting. The consumer though.
So, but here's what's interesting, right? So you and I have been taking in a lot of like Brendan Kane's content lately, right? And so he's talking about like the lowest amount of content that people tend to take in is like just purely factual. And so AI is really good at like spitting out factual data, like example, reporting on the weather. Here's what happened in the stock market today. But what it's not good at doing is like critically thinking in like first principles about like, where do we think things are going? How is the world changing? And trying to connect dots where maybe they aren't necessarily connected. And again, that's what I really mean is like people that can think authentically like that, critically, and even run the risk of maybe getting judged because somebody calls their idea stupid.
Oh, who would have thought, right? That's a great point. That last piece, because that is what stops you from actually being who you uniquely are as an entrepreneur, as a creator, is that fear of what are they going to think about this? What are they going to think about me? What are they going to say about me?
Bro, it's so hard. I mean, I deal with it all the time.
Hard. It's incredibly hard. Some people like the position like they don't do it. No, you're lying, dude. Like, here's how I know you're lying. I'm about to get spiritual on y'all. Here's how I know you're lying, because what's the first thing Adam did after eating from the tree of the knowledge?
He hid.
He hid.
Yeah.
He hid. And so they were aware, oh my, I'm naked. I got to do something about this. It's ingrained in us. Like you can actively strive against it, but that concern of what people are going to think about me is embedded in our forefather.
Yeah.
So
1,000%.
So
on that's a good note, because on the next post that I put up there was more of just like a good reminder to entrepreneurs in general. I think nobody talks about this. I really appreciated this post. So it comes from Michael Net Lease Notes and Trailer Park Tales, Michael Watson too. But he says, is there any level of wealth where real estate operators no longer feel broke? Sam Zell talked about struggling to make payroll in his book, even though he was a billionaire. And so just like take that in for a moment, right? I don't know if there is a point in time in my career where I felt like, man, I have enough in the coffers, enough cash flow to just completely relax, just cruise. Maybe that's what retirement feels like. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think everybody feels that way, but nobody says anything. Everybody just acts like, oh, it's all good. No, I'm out here killing it, you know?
Yeah. And they don't talk about, so I don't know what the guy is. He is actually, I guess, his feeling, because it probably feels different. If you're Sam Zell, you probably feel different in that space than this gentleman might, given where he is. You might have dealt with it for so long and solved the problem, and your problems, it might just feel different, but it doesn't go away. I mean, how could it? Because it's an infinite game. It could never go away,
Yep,
that wouldn't make it an infinite game at that point. That would be, I won and game's over. And, I'm in the Hall of Fame at that point. And so I think it probably feels different at Sam Zell's level. And he probably has many more things going on at his, that dude had all kind of real estate and assets. And so I doubt it goes away, because that's part of the makeup of the game.
And it's also just a good reminder to, like, you will hear a lot of influencers say that diversification is a bad thing, right? Having other sources of income is a bad thing. But for entrepreneurs, I think that, you have so much vested in this really, one vertical structure, that at a certain point when it starts cash producing, objectively, your first move isn't to go buy stuff, right? You need to be parlaying that into other means to generate income. And that is ultimately what gives you some sleep at night.
Yeah. Yep.
Certainty, right?
You hit that on the head. I literally just saw yesterday, Cody Sanchez was talking to Scott Galloway, and some people don't agree with some of his takes, but he's really, I love his takes about finances, because he tends to be very open and honest about his own wins and losses. Mm-hmm. And he was sharing how that was actually the thing he was sharing. One of the mistakes he made was not diversifying when he had actual tangible success, and he got wrecked. Yep. And so he was talking about how, like, you go deep in your space, but the second you really can actually do this, definitely start diversifying, because to your point, it's going to allow you to weather the storms, i.e. take a collective sigh of relief for a little bit, that I put in some work and I can breathe easier, like this gentleman is longing for. So I 100% agree with that. I just came across that.
That's why. So for example, like in real estate, I have a good friend, very successful operator, owns 8,100 storage units.
Oof.
And honestly, he was doing somewhere between 9 to 11 transactions a year for like the last 7 years, whether that was building them or buying them. But what he did along the way that was incredible is he started a construction company. So now they were doing work for other customers, but then they were building their own projects. And then he bought a steel company so that he could supply the steel to his own projects, but to other people as well. And now what he did is he just broke away from the property management company that he had, hired like 30 employees, and launched his own property management company as well to self-perform, basically. Wow. So he's getting scale along the way. But I don't think if he didn't have that construction arm to support him for revenue, that he would have been as successful, because a lot of these deals take a lot of time, right? And the same thing goes for business acquisition, except for, you're buying and stepping into cash flow. But like real estate development, for example, from the ground up, that's long game. And people get all excited. Oh, I want to be a real estate developer. Like, okay, well, be prepared for a year of just entitlements, and then be prepared for another year of actual development. So in 2 years, you'll see a paycheck from that. It's like, nobody can live off of that. But if you had other means of income, wouldn't be such a big deal, right? You could be doing this development. It could take 2 or 3 years over here and not really phase you.
Right. Right. I mean, yeah, this is a great reminder, man. Of me personally hearing that from Cody Sanchez and Scott Galloway to you bringing this up now from that gentleman. It's just a great piece. But the key piece is you have to find success in that thing, though. Arguably, because if you split your focus too much, you will not find success in that thing you're trying to really make your main thing. Or it's going to be a lot harder, I guess. Some people are exceptional and awesome, but it just becomes that.
I think some things just take longer, though, right? Like one of the examples I was doing some deep research on lately that's been inspiring to me is just E-Trade. Do you know when E-Trade was founded?
In the 80s.
1986.
Yeah.
And they almost went bankrupt in the 2000s. And then they switched over to digitizing stocks, tools, technology. And they got bought by Morgan Stanley for several $1 billion in 2020, right? So we're talking, 34-year run. So I think, again, like staying in the game is more important long-term, consistently chipping away than like, quote unquote, immediate success. Cause it's like, well, compared to what, right? You could be like a fuse that burns out quickly, or you could be a fuse that runs for a really long time.
See, I think this is a conversation that needs to be had more by really successful entrepreneurs, because when you haven't found massive success and you're trying to build it, not even massive success, moderate success, or even sustaining success, I think there's an internal processor that's always weighing things sometimes from this all or nothing perspective. But I think what would be really helpful would be for the people who have really done this to start putting out information and providing insight to the up and comers, because you start E-Trade in the 80s, you get acquired, into the 21st century. Today's generation, and even myself included in this at times, you tend to think like, okay, how am I going to manage that isn't doing this, go get this and still meet my goals and all of this? And I think it's very important to really be able to strategically think about accomplishing multiple things over the span of time. But there is that pressure, that feeling when you haven't had the success and you're trying to get it, that everything feels all or nothing. So you feel like, if I'm going to, how can I process more than two things without losing this all? And clearly the people in the E-Trade space, like somebody in there was, okay, building the business, but I'm still going to sustain my family over here. I'm going to continue to build the business. I got the exit coming, but I got other goals, ambitions, and dreams. I basically just like getting over that all or nothing syndrome. Let's call it that all or nothing syndrome when you're trying to accomplish multiple things over the span of a lifetime.
I think it's just generally because we're wired, or at least taught, to have this employee mindset. Like, I'm going to have one job. There's no way I can have two things going on. It's like, well, actually you can, if you just change the time horizon with which, you're supposed to, quote unquote, achieve success. Right. And that takes a little bit of time to get past, and some seasoning to really see like the fruits of the labor. Is like, hey, we actually did this for 3 years and we really started breaking out in year 3. Right. If you do that a few times, you realize that like, oh, okay, so the 3 years prior to that were just us reinvesting capital back into the thing, building the team, building the product, whatever it is. And then eventually it produced enough fruit. That delayed gratification is the difference between people who perennially are employed or those who break out and become entrepreneurs. And it's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's freaking hard. Especially when things aren't, going as well as you made a great post a couple weeks ago. It's like, what did you say? You said expectations.
Speed and execution is helpful. Speed and expectations will ruin you.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's constantly trying to kind of mitigate that mindset. That's a good segue into the next story. Just because I was flabbergasted when I read this post, but if you guys have been following along, it's trending right now. Jersey Mike's selling for $8 billion with 3,000 locations. That is wild. So So first on the topic of Jersey Mike's, when was Jersey Mike's founded? 1956 was originally operating under the name Mike Subs. And in 1975, Peter Cancro, who began working at the shop at 14, purchased the business at 17 and later rebranded it Jersey Mike's. So it really wasn't Jersey Mike's until 1975. So then when did Jersey Mike's start franchising? 1987. So 13 years later, they started the franchise model. I don't know how many locations they had at that point, but obviously not a lot. And then today they have, I think, 3,000 locations is what this post is saying.
Yeah.
Which is tremendous growth. I mean, a lot of franchises struggle to get over like 100 locations, let alone 3,000 locations.
Yeah.
Their average unit value is 1.3 million. And so this guy that made this post, we can pull it up real quick. It was really good. So Jersey Mike's selling for $8 billion with 3,000 locations at 1.3 million average unit value. Subway sold for $9.6 billion with 37,000 locations at 500K average unit value. Subway had 12x more locations, but only sold for 20% higher value. So the point being, franchise success greater than unit count, right? A business doing 500K, there's not a lot of wiggle room in there for thriving. Less than 4% of businesses get over $1 million in gross rev. So that's pretty tremendous. But I just wanted to kind of bring that back around on the topic of everything we're talking about, which is from 1975 to 2024. And then the dude sold for $8 billion. That's wild.
Dude, I mean, everything in me just keeps going back to this, like we've talked about adjusting your time horizon. But when you're young, I think when you're young and youthful, and this is maybe why there's so many confused people, is when you're young, all that vitality you have in you is seeing things and dreaming of this and wanting to accomplish this. And I want to get the billion by the time I'm 48, not 72. And that's an adjustment. That's an internal resetting of some kind that has to, obviously has to coincide with your worldview and your values. But when I think about that time frame, I'm like, man, I could feel myself internally sort of unsettled of like, wow, that's a long time to do something to see that outcome. And I'm obviously not incapable of doing that, but I just really could feel like, whoa, that's a long time to do that, to reach that, $1 billion exit. And when you're young, you're like, what, 40 years?
Well, I think having kids, being married, getting out of your 20s, living through your 30s starts to give you a lot greater perspective. Like a year doesn't feel so long to me anymore.
No.
But do you know the average age of a billionaire is?
I'm guessing 57.
66.
Okay.
A significant portion of billionaires are over the age of 70, with the oldest being 102 years old, which is an insurance tycoon, George Joseph. I don't know how relevant this is. This is a Statista, so maybe 2022. So George Joseph might not be with us anymore, but the fact that he was 102. So, I think part of that is just a perspective on how you're playing the game, right? Like, is it about a dollar amount or is it about the game? Because if you're like not obsessed, but you enjoy playing the game, then you're going to keep playing the game, right? But burnout is a very real thing, right? So people burn out in sports all the time, right? And then you see those people that play golf for, 20 years. And you're like, how did this guy play golf for 20 years? It's because he didn't burn out. He enjoyed playing the game. And eventually he became the best. Business, I think, is very much the same way. We just put so much weight on success being measured under the dollars, right, which is true, but that's really just fuel on the fire, long term. I watched a great kind of like docudrama on this woman who her husband passed away and they owned a vineyard and she ended up buying the vineyard or airing the vineyard. And it was at a time when, women weren't really allowed to participate in vineyards and winemaking. And it was a pretty elite group. Well, she kept at it for like 4 or 5 years, failing time and time again, and ultimately ended up creating a brand new way to create champagne, which is still used today, right? Because she was more obsessed with like the success of the game than she was about the dollars, even though she was getting her butt kicked for like 4 or 5 years. So I think that's crucial outlook that we need to have as entrepreneurs on an ongoing basis, right?
I agree. And I think that the hard part is, I think when, I think we've done ourselves a disservice on so many levels as a nation, where we don't talk about money and finance and wealth, the time relationship to the accumulation of wealth. And so when 2 generations of people get out into the world and are professionally ambitious, all they know is time exchange for dollars, right? But also all they know, we're disconnected from the elders. And so we don't really have that insight of like, here's what it takes, here's how long it actually takes, here's your relationship to your profession. The average time span you spend at a job has continued to just dwindle and dwindle. 4 years, I think it's like the max right now, or something like that. And so I think we culturally, we have not internally matured to be able to handle the weight of entrepreneurship. But externally, like technologically and outside of ourselves, we're ready for that. We're like, we got all the tools and the tech, but those old timers are looking at us like, yeah, I don't get it. And I think that's really important what you just said. Did you really gotta really hunker down and understand, like, it's not about the money, but it feels about the money. And that's what we don't talk about. We just say like, it's not about the money. And it's like, well, I know, but I feel like it is. So don't, help me understand how it's not, and we've just lost sight of some of this wisdom and these deep, real conversations that, it's what we were talking about earlier. The West has really lost sight of who she is. So.
Yeah. I mean, change the context. We do this in other parts of our life too, right? Like
Facts.
Dieting, right? It's like how you eat, your regular diet makes you healthy. But then we also use the same term, going on a diet, to signify that we're going to try to lose weight. So a short-term objective to a long-term problem, right? So we have this disproportionate relationship with time and success. And so it's a shift. And like game is one of the ones that I really rely on to help me get clear on.
Who was that? You cut out. What did you say?
I said game theory mindset.
Game theory. Okay.
Is something that I really focus on to help me like reshift the time horizon with which I should be playing the game. What else am I going to be doing? Right. So it's like, okay, let's just keep chipping away at this thing. It might not be as quote unquote successful as we want it to be, but if I have other means of making money, like why not? Let's just keep it going.
Well, that's it. Redefining success, right? Like what does it mean to be successful? Is that dollar amount, or is that the person you become in this one life you have and the people around you and their well-being and so forth? Not necessarily being able to buy them boats and take them on trips and stuff, but what does it mean to be successful?
Exactly. I think, and this is another good segue to the next point, but I think part of the issue that we're up against is just inflation. Mm-hmm. It gives us the sense of like we're behind. Mm-hmm. Right. You remember when like making $100,000 was like
a big deal.
Yeah. And then it was like being a millionaire. That's a pretty big deal. Well, the national debt just reached $36 trillion, right? That's $106,000 per person in America.
That most of us don't have. Wow.
Yeah, correct. And so again, like the short term, we can just print more money, credit cards, that we've created a whole mindset around no delayed gratification or immediate gratification. And there's no repercussion for that type of mindset other than you probably give up on a lot of your goals and dreams because you're not getting as fast as you somehow made up in your mind you should be achieving these things.
Yeah, it's a recipe for frustration and foolishness.
100%. So I just wanted to bring that up because, that's pretty staggering. Very thankful that we can hopefully see some end to this just ridiculous overspending and whatnot. But because of this money printing, we're now looking down the barrel of 700 regional banks are in jeopardy of failing due to the collapse of commercial real estate values. And so right now, about 700 regional banks are in jeopardy of failing due to the collapse of commercial real estate values. Demand for real estate loans is at 2008 crisis levels, with interest rates too high and no bids for new buildings. What's the result? Banks are left holding distressed assets, violating core capital requirements. The problem is even worse due to duration risk. Banks locked in low interest treasuries during COVID, but now must pay out 5% to depositors while earning 2% on those investments. With unrealized loss close to $1 trillion, the biggest threats that is Bank of America. If you have money there, think twice. It may not be safe. We've talked about this before. Yep. This is why Warren Buffett unloaded so much of his portfolio, even though he's has been historically one of the largest shareholders in Bank of America. He was very outspoken about how he felt about they're doing and how they're handling business. All that to say that everything we've been talking about today, right? You need some diversification. If you're a business owner, play the long game. Now's not the time to be overly aggressive. It's also not the time to bow out. It's been a very hard market to play in for the last couple of years. And for those of you that have actually been doing it, are actually in the arena, like, I commend you for that. Just hang tight. Like, keep going. It's hard. It's hard, dude. And like, I'm kind of emotional, man, over the last 10 minutes of our pod. I'm just reflecting on some things, like, and even what you just said, man, and reading Porter Stansberry here is just like the delayed gratification. If you cannot live, grow, build, chase, make mistakes with a real understanding of delayed gratification, it is a recipe for frustration and foolishness, because you will become impatient or make short-term decisions that have long-term consequences, and you will make them without understanding how to actually obtain the thing you want. And I just hope that you guys are tracking with this thread, because you are in business and you've taken hits, you've taken the shots, man. To Samson's point, don't bow out, don't give up, and it's hard not to. It just is. And that's a reality. And anybody up there telling you it's not hard, like, because people do it in very subtle ways with their content, their books, their media, and their messages. It's hard. It's absolutely. I had a friend who, super sharp entrepreneur, ton of great ideas, built a really successful company, and it reached a point where it was kind of starting to feel a little flat, or wasn't growing the way that he had wanted it to. And he got excited about, we get excited about the novelty of a new idea, forgetting about how freaking hard it was to get this idea to what it is today. It feels better. It feels better, and we get that dopamine hit. So what he ended up doing was he ended up selling his company at probably way less than he probably should have, thinking that he had to give that up in order to go start this new thing, instead of, I just need to get this thing reoriented and have some delayed gratification here and just keep pushing it forward. And about 2 years went by, and he says to me, man, I wish I would have never sold that company. Like, I wish I would have just stayed consistent with it and changed my time horizon, because that company today would be worth so much more. And that was very helpful to me early on in my career, before I really broke out into entrepreneurship as I was an entrepreneur, to realize that hindsight, like, a lot of times when you feel that way, you actually just need space. You just need clarity. Maybe you need some time off to just like reset before you make a hasty decision. It's kind of like marriage, right? Mm-hmm. It's not going to be perfect all the time. So sometimes if things are very chaotic, you might think like, we should probably just get a divorce. It's like, or maybe I just need some headspace to clear my head and reorient my thoughts and get recentered, and realize that that's an irrational thought. Mm-hmm. And long-term, I forgot about what we've been through or how long it took to get to this point, you know, and what my life would be like without that. And do I really want to do that?
Mm-hmm. That's good, man.
So, yeah, I mean, like I said at the beginning of this pod, like I've been spending a ton of time just reflecting and thinking, and I've gotten much better over the years of just dealing with that. But fourth quarter is a great time to just reflect on it.
Killer. I like it. Let's
okay, last one on wealth and money and just stocks. I just want to put this out there right now because we're talking about diversification. We're talking about getting your money. If you're an entrepreneur, you've probably been very purse strung, maybe not able to invest in as much in your 401k or stocks or whatever it might be. And now you're just seeing the stock market has just kept ripping. And so this is a great post that came out from X Trends. It says Trump's new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, says, we are going to decide whether we're going to grow our way out of this debt burden. And I think we can through deregulation, energy independence, and dominance in the U.S. and a growth mindset. I feel very strongly that this is the last chance to grow ourselves out of this. He goes on to say his own commentary, sounds great for the future of America, but not for risk assets overall. Say bye-bye to deficit and government spending that created this decades-long enormous bubble. There will be a transition period which may take several years, and risk assets will suffer greatly. Undoing decades-long policy mistakes will have a price. And remember, outliers revert with velocity, meaning it's going to be exponentially worse going the other direction or faster. Mm-hmm. Did market know what was coming? I absolutely think so. Otherwise, why growth stocks would suffer since Trump's lead in the polls? You see, Bessent talks about bringing growth back, but ironically, growth stocks are underperforming. Why? Because the market knows that without deficit spending, the bubble will burst. And as always, hot money / smart money is now leaving high beta growth names before major market turn. They always lead. While I have doubts about the Trump administration and new Treasury Secretary will do as they say they will do, it will be great for the future of America. But during the transition period, the bubble will burst with velocity. All that to say that if you're feeling, this is my own personal investment strategy, so take this as you
financial disclosure.
If you're feeling like anxiety, like I gotta get in, I gotta buy Bitcoin, I gotta do stocks, my first wisdom to you is like really assess your financial stability and what you're about to risk. Mm-hmm. If you can live completely without it, then sure, it's great. But now is not the time to get FOMO.
Dude, that's great, man. Because that's a real thing happening right now. I mean, it's a real thing. Bitcoin hit 100, hitting 100K and people, I got to get in. It's going to hit 10 million a coin. And
yeah, no, it's not. That's what people who don't normally talk about it are talking about it.
Yeah. But that to that point of, I got to get in. I can see that now's the time to get in. I don't want to miss out. It's okay if you miss out if you are a strategic thinker. Because Correct. The way wealth works, the way it has always worked, is there have not only been one type of person doing one type of thing that has had the outcome you desired to have. So think big picture. That's a good word. Well, speaking of big picture here, we'll transition to some marketing and talk about Jaguar. And did you hear any news last week about Jaguar?
Oh yeah.
So I intentionally was like discarding the news last week because I saw it when it came out and I was like, I'm not even going to jump into that. But I just looked at it and I have the commercial here. I don't know if you had a chance to watch the commercial that they did you watch the commercial?
Briefly.
Okay.
I didn't watch the whole thing, but we should watch it.
Let's tune up this commercial here because let's get into why the people are like, what are they doing? So first thing you notice here is that is a radically different logo than what they previously had.
The iconic brand change.
Yeah. So they're moving just out the gate, front line about from who they were to who they are going to be now. So let's see what Jaguar's got to say. Actually, let me not blow your guys' ears out like I did last week. So this has not landed well.
No.
This has not landed well at all for this iconic manufacturer of vehicles. And some context on this blindsided a lot of consumers, right? A lot of people who really actually do like do love the Jaguar brand and the class and really just the styles of vehicles. Anyways, these European manufacturers that they stand for something. So people are kind of caught off guard. And I think Newsweek did a great article. I'm going to say a great article, but they just gave some great color on what's going on behind the scenes. And so I'm just going to peruse through this real quickly. They gave a decent analysis and breakdown that I'm going to share with you guys. So this comes by way of Newsweek, as I mentioned. They say Jaguar rebrand called disastrous as focus on diversity. The diversity comes under fire. I won't go through there, but here's some context on really the pressure and everything. So Lulu Chang Miservi, co-founder of the roster PR group called the rebrand disastrous, right? It's the company should highlight innovation and engineering and pick a clear lane for branding. So you have experts saying, what happened to the innovation and engineering, and you've muddied up your entire brand at the moment. It's possible a marketing exec read too many think pieces about how millennials shop based on values and forgot that people want cars that are built really well. And so here's some context on it. The rebrand comes has manual. What is that writing there? I'm sorry. It's like confusing me. The rebrand comes as the manufacturer suffered from dwindling sales in recent years. Last year, fewer than 67,000 Jaguar cars were sold worldwide. That is not a big number, guys. Roughly half the number sold during the fiscal year that included the start of the coronavirus pandemic. Currently, there are only 122 Jaguar dealerships in the United States, a significant decline from a peak of around 200, as reported by Car and Driver. And so really what's at the heart of this is this need to rescue a failing car manufacturer. But there's a channel out there, this guy named Antonio. He had a great video about Jaguar, and I'm going to try to play it here. I think I might be having some audio issues, but he goes into the entire history of the company and several other different elements. This was 3 months ago that this video came out. He says the billion-dollar company that's miserably failing. And so if I can cue this up for us, and it actually works. Let's see.
Stuff together and are doing very well.
Are you able to hear that? Okay, cool.
Now, and yet Jaguar just seems to be stuck for some reason. While the strategy on paper looks great, all electric also means that gas and diesel car buyers will have to be ignored. With so much money being poured into R&D and marketing to get consumers to buy into their products and to this grand idea of electronic vehicles, Jaguar has seemed to detach themselves from what buyers actually want from the brand: class, elegance, and power, not an electric substitute. But this issue, guys, is just scratching the surface. There's actually a bigger problem, in my opinion, that they are facing, and that is their lineup. Other car companies like Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Audi rely on a large portfolio of vehicles in order to generate revenue and attract customers. Makes sense, right? Jaguar, on the other hand, only offers 6 vehicles in their lineup. And this begs the question, why? Well, this deliberate choice is based on a belief that offering too many vehicles can detract from the revenue generation of their staple products, such as the F-Pace. So by focusing on a smaller and simpler lineup, they're able to serve a larger number of customers with a higher success rate. At least that's the theory. But what is actually happening? Well, other than a tiny SUV lineup, Jaguar has one sedan, the XF, and a sports car, the F-Type, on sale. And these cars aren't really bringing in any huge numbers either. For example, in 2021, more units of the Jeep Wrangler were sold in the UK than the Jaguar XF. For many, the smaller lineup strategy fails to give consumers adequate choices. For example, if you wanted to buy an SUV, you're only choosing between the F-Pace and the smaller compact luxury version, the E-Pace. Likewise, if I wanted to buy a sedan, the only option is the XF, while the other sports car model is their F-Type. With only a few models to choose from, it can be hard to find what you exactly want. And competitors like Audi, for example, have capitalized on the SUV and crossover craze, and their Q5 model is consistently rated favorable amongst buyers. It just seems like Jaguar is missing a huge opportunity by not trying to tap into that market and offer more options to their customers.
So why would you not offer more options to your customers? Obviously, they have their strategic positioning, but why this could be a serious blunder is because what things have continued to change for the consumer? Well, specifically in the UK and even here in the US, significant locations of the company, we just looked at that number, a national debt number, right? That's $100,000 that the average citizen is actually holding over their heads. And a car manufacturer like Jaguar is not necessarily going to continue to appeal to these multiple generations that don't believe they can afford or actually tangibly can afford a certain way of living. And so having 6 vehicles that are particularly and historically for a certain set of people, Jaguar owners tend to be like 46 to 55 years old. So you have 6 vehicles reaching one demographic that is continuing to shrink in terms of your TAM, your total addressable market, that's out there. And so it's not really a recipe for a disaster. I mean, it is a recipe for a disaster. And so I thought that was a great breakdown of those
You want my take just as an observer?
Yeah, what you got?
This is the typical tale of more, better, new.
Mm-hmm.
They opted for new, but I haven't seen a lot of advertising from Jaguar just in general. They're kind of a forgotten brand. Once Land Rover consumed them and Land Rovers and Jaguar dealerships became one, they stopped doing their advertising.
Right.
But let's face it, people that go to a Land Rover dealership are going there for Land Rover. They're not going there for Jaguar.
Right.
So one, forgotten brand, better, right? They could have just really tapped into, because it was always grace, elegance, and performance was like the core of the Jaguar brand. They didn't really push that. Some cool, sleek design, but they're saying that the only way for performance is by way of an electrical vehicle.
All right.
Well, we already know the adoption metrics on electric, right? We know that it's taken a really long time to reach 10% market saturation on that. So if you're just looking at from pure adoption of newer technology, I mean, Tesla probably leads the market. And if you're a Tesla fan, you're probably not going to go buy an electrical vehicle like Jaguar. So that's not why you go to Jaguar.
Right.
So they just opted for a full-on like, hey, the problem isn't the fact that we need to do more or better. It's that we're just totally missing the mark and we got to go tap a new audience. And that's where the failure comes in, that
Very
it couldn't
much
be further from the truth.
Yeah, and it's like a multi-pointed, because like even what I was saying, like that's a strategic error. That's a strategic error from a brand standpoint. Even their positioning in media. This is actually a bigger conversation. Have you ever seen a car commercial and said, I got to go buy that car?
Nope.
Never. And I'm willing to bet 89% of people across the world feel that way. And these companies spend so much money and well, not Jaguar in this case, but they spend so much money pushing out all of this media in these cars and these commercials and these major, and it's not landing. And at the same time, you never seen a Tesla ad. I've never seen a Tesla ad. Right. But Tesla's on the ground talking to the people. Tesla CEO is making content, like it's just this disconnect from where the consumer actually has their attention and buying affection. A lot of these manufacturers miss this. They just miss it. So many companies miss this.
I would say a lot of people buy Tesla because of Elon.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. But so absent of Elon, like why do people buy Audi or BMW or Porsche or Rolls Royce? Right. So Jaguar doesn't have either of that. They don't have a person that aligns with the brand that'd be like, oh, I want to buy that. And they definitely don't have, or at least they've lost that appeal to the market.
Yeah.
Grace, elegance, and performance, which was like the core of their brand, right?
Yeah. So let me show you this last thing, and then we're going to close out with Volvo at the same time last week put out an ad that people are losing their minds over in a good way. I don't know if you saw that, but I
definitely did not see that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's check out. We'll check out this second to last piece here. This is the head of brand strategy at Jaguar, and this honestly does sum it up. And it sums it up really how the perspective has changed in what was a legacy luxury car manufacturer, and it's foolish.
And at Jaguar, we're passionate about our people, and we're committed to fostering a diverse, inclusive, and unified culture that is representative not only of the people who use our products, but in a society in which we all live, a culture where our employees can bring their authentic selves to work. And we're on a transformative journey of our own, driven by a belief in diversity, inclusion, creativity, policy, and most importantly, action. We've established over 15 DEI groups such as Pride, who are here tonight in the back. Thank you guys for coming. Women in Engineering and Neurodiversity Matters. We've launched major policy revisions such as transitioning at work to drive equity and support for our communities, embracing individuality as our superpower. And at Jaguar, we're passionate about our people.
So that's the fatal mistake of latching onto a trend and missing the trend.
Yeah, because people have already exactly the next wave is common sense. Right is right, wrong is wrong. Men are men and women are women, and you can skip me with the nonsense.
Yeah, exactly right.
So that being said, Volvo, on the other hand, leaned into this. I mean, I think they leaned into it. Many people feel that way, that they leaned into what's actually happened. This is a long ad, so we won't go through the whole. It's like 3 minutes, almost 4 minutes long, but we'll get into it a bit here.
Hey. Okay. Yeah. Well.
Hey, love.
Hey, Mom.
How are you guys? How you doing?
Yeah, we're good.
Something wrong?
No, but we've actually got something to tell you. Kate's pregnant.
Oh, I'm joking.
You're gonna be a grandma.
Oh my God. Have a sleep.
I'm scared, Mom.
Why are you scared?
About it all, you know. The nights, the responsibility. We're gonna need a bigger place.
Help with all that.
I know. Bless you. You're so sweet. I've got this feeling that we're gonna have a daughter. Just as stubborn as her mum.
Oh, hopefully not. The family's large.
Now that's a legacy she might have to live with. She might be the reason we tied a knot.
What if I don't do good in class?
I just want to say and do the right things, you know? I want to see the world with her. I'll also be happy staying home, doing nothing, letting her be a kid.
Are you awake?
Number 32.
Thank you.
I want to see her fall in love. But I also know what that means. And I know she's going to bend the rules just like I did. And one day, I'll have to let her go. I'm excited to hear what she learns about the world. herself. She adores. She hates. I hope she likes the name you give her.
Have you thought of any?
It all depends. We like Leia.
Boom.
First off, that commercial got me emotional.
Dude, I'm telling you.
It hit me right in the feels. But man, I was just thinking about all the thoughts going through my head, right? Like family, safety, and the way that they ended it with the Volvo actually being hyper responsive and protecting her from not getting hit by the car was a phenomenal conclusion to that whole entire story that they just told.
Very much so. Shout out to the guy who shared it. I forget his name. Shout out to Volvo, but Guilherme Yuan. But he said, so look at what he said. Look at what they did though. 3 minutes, 46-second ad shot by Hoyt van Hoytema, the cinematographer of Interstellar and Oppenheimer. Man. So it goes against every single rule you can think about: a social lead, length, format, overproduce. But here's the impact of understanding the cultural moment, but also staying true to who you are in the cultural moment. Every comment under the ad said it immediately put Volvo in their consideration set. It's effing fantastic. And that's what you're looking for as a car manufacturer that's trying to reach and move business across multiple generations, is to remain in the purview of the radar of the consumer as they go through life. And they nailed it, man. And Jaguar could learn a lesson, and they still have time to they came out and said like, hey, we're going to bear with us. We got more stuff coming, but they have an opportunity to do it right. And you can understand why they're trying to make the moves they're trying to make. But if you're going to go for new and breaking molds and all of this, you should probably at least show a car in your ad. Wasn't a single car in their ad, but it's like, so all people are going to respond to is what they're seeing, which is you want to show us these atypical figures that you're breaking the mold, but you don't even show us how that relates to the car in any possible way. So you could have done that better. Big miss. So
a quick note on cars. You know what one jingle and brand that has stuck with me through my entire life is when I say like a rock. What brand do you think of?
Chevy.
100%. Why do you think I own a GMC today? I was thinking about, why do I own a GMC? Chevy and GMC are basically the same car company. GMC would be the more, I guess, luxurious version, although they're pretty much identical these days. But man, that commercial impacted me in a big way.
Well, so this is actually something that I've been theorizing for a minute, which is these companies that have these big budgets and they're positioning to be big players in industries, even smaller guys that have big budgets, they have to understand that the game is wide open for that type of connecting. Once again, it closed for a while because everyone turned off, but it's wide open now.
Well, and if you were looking at probably the largest segment of the market, who's your buyer at the moment, be the millennial generation, man, nostalgia and going back to like a rock. Chevy, if you're listening to this, you should go back and bring that back to traditional American dream, like a rock brand, and watch what happens, because that would connect in a big way.
Yeah, and there's just space to get back to that narrative based, story based thing that pulls out that one great idea, that one statement that becomes the thing that resonates with the customer. Like, Volvo did a great job with that ad, resonating. And like, I was getting goosebumps rewatching it again, and I've seen it a couple of times already, and there's space for that once again, because we went so fast, so much volume, so much this, so much copycat, so fast all the time. There's now a time where the consumer attention is actually like, what's out there? And so you have a great opportunity.
That's good. That's a great way to end it.
Facts. All right. Well, on that note, that's the pod.
Yep. Till next time.
Take
Peace.
care.
God bless.